Hi, welcome to CCJ 300, the PowerPoint on how to write an APA research paper. This is a really important PowerPoint because it's your first overview of what is required for the APA research paper you're going to write, the different parts, and what's required in each part. Again, this is just a basic overview. We will go into a more in-depth look of each of the various parts before they're due. Also, a reminder, the APA Publication Manual, which is the required textbook for this class. I also have included a link for the online free textbook manual as well. So you can have the in-hand one that you can purchase on the bookstore, or on Amazon, or trading, or you can actually utilize the online link that I provide on Moodle. It's the first thing under the beginning of each week. All right, let's get started. This PowerPoint will also be available for you to review without the video so that when you write each portion, you can go back to make sure you have in all of the required parts, especially the star. See that big orange star? You're going to see that throughout this PowerPoint, and you need to make sure as you're writing the various portions that you include whatever the starred items are in those portions. All right, let's look at an overview of all of the parts of the research paper that you're going to be writing and that will be due various weeks throughout this quarter. All right, title page. That is on one page. Your abstract is on the second page on its own page. That's 150 to 250 words. Then you have the introduction, which starts the third page of your paper, and that is 1 to 2 pages minimum, and then begins at the end of your introduction is your thesis statement. Right, then you have the literature review, which is the main bulk of your paper. That's a minimum of 1,500 words. And then you have your conclusions, which is 1 to 2 pages, your references, which you have to have a minimum of 4, and then you have a table and an appendix. All right, let's go into each one of those a little bit more in depth. All right, the first thing is your title page. First of all, you need to be writing this APA research paper in Microsoft Word. All right, so I've given an example of the title page. Also in Moodle below this video are several different examples of various research papers students have written in the past, so you can kind of follow along to see what they look like and should look like. But the formatting is very important. So if you look 1 through 5, this really goes over what the margins are, which is 1 inch, the font, which is Times New Roman, regular size 12, what should be on the header. This is really important. If you look right here on the first page is running head. The R is capitalized, the H is not, and then in all caps you have a shortened title. So if you go, what's a shortened title? Well, let's go down here and look at the title of this paper. The title is The Literary Styles of Ray Bradbury in the 20th Century. A shortened title is Literary Styles of Ray Bradbury. All right, so that kind of gives you an idea. And then on the title page, right justified, you have the page number. And then this middle area right here, which is 2 inches down or a third down on your paper, is double spaced and can be a little bit different depending on the professor. For this class, you're going to have your complete title, you're going to have your first and last name, and then you're going to have this university, Southern Oregon University. All right, just to kind of go over, hopefully this will give you a little directions and instructions on how to format. So in Microsoft Word, depending whether you're using a Mac or a desktop or laptop, if you go to home, you have font. That's where you find your Times New Roman, regular size 12. And you can actually hit default, and that'll make it default so that it does not change. This goes in under page layout. If you hit normal, that is your margins 1 inch all the way around. And there are also some great videos on YouTube that will go into more APA layouts and requirements if you do not know how to do that on Microsoft Word. And of course, you can always email me. Okay, now we are into page 2. Again, after your title page, this goes on its own page. Our header has changed. So if you look at the top left, we do not have running head anymore. It is just your shortened title. Page number is now 2. It is justified. And then you have abstract. That is not in all caps, just the A is capitalized. It is centered below the header. That's your header. There's no indentation as far as the first sentence in your abstract. And the body of the abstract is left justified. This abstract is 150 to 250 words. The only issue that I ever see with the abstract generally has to do with it not being a minimum of 150 words. All right, next, see the stars? In the abstract, and you have to label these as well. You'll see them in the examples. The only time you don't label these is in the final submission of your final draft at the end of the quarter. But for right now, you are going to be labeling ID problem. You're going to actually type out ID the problem, and you're going to type out what the problem is. You're going to type out ID parties involved. You're going to type out the parties that are involved, methodology, so on and so forth. So you need to make sure that in those 150 words, you have typed out all of these 4-starred items and answered those questions. All right. Thesis statements. All right, your thesis statement is after the introduction. And the reason we always have students kind of start with this thesis statement before they write anything is it helps you write everything. And I'll go into that in a minute. But that thesis statement is really, really important because it's going to identify what you're going to write. Now, first of all, you're going to have to choose what type of thesis statement you want. And we're going to go into this more in depth, so I'm just going to quickly review these now. Is it analytical? Is it expository? Or is it argumentative? And you see how those have orange stars? So you will actually label that at the end of your thesis statement, the type of thesis statement you are writing. All right, your thesis statement has 2 parts. The first part is your opinion on your topic. Your opinion can be an analytical opinion, an expository explaining opinion, or an argumentative opinion. And then the second part are the facts that you're going to write about in your literature review. So it could be fact 1, fact 2, fact 3. It doesn't have to be 2 facts or 3 facts. It's generally, I can tell you, I normally see around 3 or 4 facts for a 1,500-word literature review, but it's going to be whatever facts you are trying to explain or analyze or argue within your literature review. So let's look at an example. So if your thesis, your opinion is prison overcrowding in America is a shame, the facts you're going to talk about is shameful fact 1, it creates competition for limited resources. Shameful fact 2, it increases the likelihood of recidivism. And shameful fact 3, suicide rates are higher. So your thesis could be prison overcrowding in America is a national shame because it creates competition for limited resources, comma, increases the likelihood of recidivism, comma, and suicide rates are higher in prison, period. And that would be your thesis statement. Why this is so important is because I'm going to go looking at your thesis statement, and then I'm going to make sure in your literature review that you talk about those 3 shameful facts. Make sense? All right. Thesis statement. Here are some examples. So an example of an analytical thesis statement would be an analysis of the college admission process reveals one challenge facing counselors, accepting students with high test scores or students with strong extracurricular backgrounds. So that paper that follows, the literature review, should explain the analysis of the college admission process and explain the challenge facing admission counselors. All right, I go on to give an example of an expository thesis statement and also an argumentative thesis statement. You can pause here and go ahead and read through those. All right, next, your introduction. And again, the reason I normally have you focus on your thesis statement first, even though it follows the introduction, is because it really helps you know and do that research to know where you're going and what you're going to be talking about. And so you really need to know it before you write your introduction. All right, so your introduction in order does come after your title page and your abstract. It does have to be 1 page minimum, and you can see we have some more stars. So there's 4 stars, there's a couple stars here. You need to, in the introduction somewhere, type out what the specific problem is. So type out specific problem, and then I want you to list what the problem is. You're going to describe the research strategy, so how to investigate the problem. So you're going to type that out, how to investigate the problem, and then you're going to write how you investigated it, where you looked, where you're finding most of your literature. And then concluding in your introduction, you're going to mention what outcomes you predict. So you're going to type out outcomes predicted, and then you will note that. And then finally, why you expect the results that you are going to expect. So you'll write or type out why you expect the results, and then you'll type that out. All right, literature review. So obviously after your introduction and then your thesis statement, and again, your thesis statement is preparing the reader what you're going to analyze or explain or argue. This is where you're going to explain all that or argue all that. And this is where you need to make sure that your references tie in with your literature review. You don't want to have too many quotes and you don't want to have not enough. And we'll get to this more in depth, but this is just a first look at the literature review. And then finally, your conclusion. You're going to conclude for 1 or 2 pages. You're going to tie everything together, and you can see that star again. You got to make sure that there are detailed suggestions, and we're not talking, for example, if you write on implicit bias in policing. Well, your detailed suggestions are not more training for police officers. I want detailed suggestions that go into they should receive this training, this every month or every 3 months, and they should be tested and go on and explain what you're talking about. Again, we're going to talk about this more in depth, but this is just getting you to start thinking about your conclusion. All right, your reference page. This is kind of how it's formatted. Again, you can see top left, you have your shortened running head, you have your page number. Again, centered, you have your references. And this is really different. It is alphabetical, you can see, but your first line of your reference is not indented where your second line is. And again, it's 1-inch margin all around. All right, there are 4 minimum references that are required, and you must utilize all 4 of those in your literature review. So in those 1,500 words, you have to either paraphrase or quote from the 4 required references. So you have to have at least 1 journal article, 1 book, 1 newspaper magazine, and 1 website. Of course, that newspaper magazine or book can be an online where you find it. So it's a book that you found that is a book, but it doesn't have to be an actual book that you hold. I was looking around for a book. It could actually be a book that has been placed online, but it does have to be considered a book, or it does have to be considered a newspaper or magazine. You can utilize more than 4 references, of course, but if you utilize 5 or 6 or 7, that 5th, 6th, or 7th reference also has to be utilized in your literature review. All right, you have to have at least 1 appendix. So 1 appendix is called an appendix. If you have 2 or more, it's an appendix. And I've gotten the spelling at the top, so it's kind of confusing. And I always have students that don't totally understand the difference between an appendix and a table. So an appendix is basically material that is relatively short. It could be a list of a stimulus materials. It could be a detailed description of a complex piece of equipment, or detailed demographic description of subpopulations. This is an example of an appendix. And again, you can see how you have your shortened title, your page number, and then left justified is what appendix it is, A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3. This talks about how to cite an appendix. So you can pause here. And you have to have at least 1 table. So tables are more generally identifying some types of research numbers, things like that. I've given a table 1 here. You can see how it's table 1. And this is homicides by race of victim in the United States from 1993. And it has the different numbers. So tables are kind of when you think of an Excel spreadsheet of numbers. That's what a table is. And here's another example of a table. All right, and here is another example of how to cite a table, of what you put at the bottom of the table, what you put in the in-text citation, and in the reference list. All right, you can pause here if you want as well to look at this in more depth. All right, that's it for a quick overview of all the different portions of the APA research paper and the starred items that you have to spell out in the different parts. I'll see you at the next video.